I've had my Switch for almost 8 years now, and I decided to mod it over 2 years ago. And I've done so much with this thing in that time. As a matter of fact, it's what I used to start this channel in the first place. My first videos were all about showcasing Switch mods, and we've definitely come a long way since then. So in this video, I want to talk about what's on my Switch, talk about the console itself, some homebrew apps, plugins, and games. Also, I haven't updated my Switch in months. I only choose to showcase what I do here because it's still supported with 19.0.1. So issues of any firmware beyond it I have no knowledge of. Now without further ado, let's get right into it. So here's my Switch. If you noticed, I do have custom Joy-Cons and a custom backplate. The left Joy-Con here has a D-pad. It's more of an overlay button than an actual D-pad, but I love using it when playing retro games in handheld mode. The backplate set on the other hand was sent to me by none other than eXtremeRate. It's also where I got the D-pad Joy-Con shells, which I bought myself last year. In the box, this is what to expect. I of course already opened it, but think of this as an example. I mainly picked the shell from them as my Switch backplate is old, dusty, and scratched up, so this really doubled as a refurbishment. This wasn't a difficult swap, but I did strip one of the screws on the backplate, so I had to rip it off. Thankfully it didn't do major damage, and the swap went smoothly after that. The kit I received also comes with white Joy-Con shells to match, which looks so good. Not only that, I also received this Mario Kart 8 style Pro Controller shell, which features chameleon purple-blue buttons, which looks so awesome. The buttons feel slightly different compared to the original Pro Controllers, but the difference isn't anything major. I love the aesthetic of this one, and not to mention the Pro Controller is one of the easiest to shell swap, and this only took me about 15 minutes. I also received this translucent red shell, which is a really neat nod to the transparent N64 and Game Boy aesthetic. This one does use a different plastic, but still looks and feels great. And one more I want to throw in is the Switch Cube shell. I bought this one last year and for one main reason. The octagonal gates are similar to the original GameCube controller. This is purely a visual thing as it doesn't affect gameplay, but it really feels nice to have a GameCube style Pro controller. Of course they can't really act as a replacement for a GameCube controller as it doesn't have analog triggers, but I would still recommend this one. Huge thanks to eXtremeRate for sending me some of these over to check out. I've been using their products for over a year now and have not once had a bad experience. If you want to pick any of these up or check out their other products, feel free to go to my link in the description and use my code Falcon for 10% off, which will also help support the channel. Now with that out of the way, let's get into some homebrew stuff. Okay, before I get into the apps and such, I want to talk about modding the Switch itself. I of course have a V1 unpatched Switch, which were the launch window units. It is the only model that can be modded with an RCM jig and does not need a mod chip. The Switch Lite, OLED, and more recent revisions of the original Switch are considered patched and require a mod chip. There is a website you can Google to check if your Switch serial number is patched or not. If it is, then you can't perform the soft mod. Some V1 Switches may be patched as well, so it's important to check that site before attempting anything. Anyway, back to the showcase. So here's my home menu. I have a custom theme of course, very basic, but I think it works. Here are the main homebrew apps I have, the homebrew menu, Melon DS, the homebrew app store, and RetroArch. But before I get into those, I want to show off some really neat plugins. So by pressing a button combination, the overlay menu pops up. I still use Tesla as I'm not interested in Ultrahand at the moment, and Tesla doesn't give me any issues either. So I have FPS Locker, Status Monitor, EmuWeebo, Sys Module Toggler, SysClock, which tells you the clock speed and temperatures, and SysTune, which lets you play music in the background, which is so neat. Okay, so I'm going to test out the FPS Locker with Breath of the Wild here, and if I go to the menu here, you can see that I have the FPS target set to 60, and if I go to Edison, the cheat for 60 FPS is enabled as well. I also have SysClock enabled. There's multiple profiles to choose, but I choose the max for this game. This is not recommended for extended periods of time as it could damage the battery and cause overheating, but I'm just testing it here to show you that Breath of the Wild can hit 60 FPS on the original Switch. As you can see here, it does hit 60 FPS sometimes, and if we go to the status monitor, we can see all the stats like the fan speed, battery drainage, resolution, GPU usage, etc. There's multiple modes for the status monitor, so you can have it on as long as you need. And if we go to the FPS counter, you can see it doesn't hit 60 very often, and it's draining my battery a lot, so I won't be using this even if it does give better performance, since it can cause irreparable damage. Speaking of the status monitor, you can also check the battery stats on the Switch as well, such as the raw charge, temperature, and battery age. So my battery health here is at 87.7% after nearly 8 years of usage, which I believe is normal. Okay, the final plugin I want to show here is Mission Control, which lets you pair a ton of different controllers to the Switch wirelessly. So I have my Wii U Pro controller here, I just press the sync button, give it a few seconds, and there we go, it works. Rumble works as well, which is so awesome. I also have my PS5 controller, same process, it pairs up seamlessly, and the motion controls and pointer work too. I played Mario Galaxy with this one for a while and it works great. The last one I have here is the Wiimote. This one pairs as well, and the rumble is very intense for some games, but it's pretty usable. The classic controller also works, but the dead zones for the sticks are a bit off and it doesn't do a full 360 rotation when I use it. Okay, now it's time to jump into the Homebrew menu. So here I have all my apps. I've got some emulators like Flycast, games like FNF Rewritten, which I'll talk about later, the Homebrew App Store, JKSV, Melon DS, MGBA, Moonlight, PPSSPP, RetroArch, and a few others like the USB file transfer, which I use to transfer mod files for my games. So speaking of, the Homebrew App Store hosts the majority of the apps I just showed, plus some Homebrew games, some emulators, and utilities like Mission Control. Overall a must-have app. One that I really want to highlight here is JKSV. It's so helpful and is my preferred way to back up my save data so I can put it on my PC for safekeeping, or use it with an emulator. I also want to talk about one of my personal favorites, which is Moonlight. It lets you connect to your PC and act as a remote desktop. And I'm able to access my Steam games and play them with the Switch controls. Here I have Unleashed Recompiled, which is so awesome to see on the Switch, even if it isn't running natively. How about some Black Ops 3? This is by far my favorite COD, mostly for the zombies of course. The controls are a bit delayed, but it's still playable. Or better yet, some Project Plus. The controls are a bit wonky since the Joy-Cons aren't the best, but it's just so awesome to see that the Switch is able to act as a streaming device. Performance is very dependent on your internet speed, so Ethernet is recommended to help reduce the lag, which is why I don't use this too much. Okay, now for some emulation. I have shown this before, but I really want to highlight some emulators here. First, Dreamcast emulation through Flycast. Sonic Adventure 2 runs great. With some overclocking, it maintains a consistent 60 FPS from my testing. I also tried Soul Calibur 1, which does have some pop-in for me forcing widescreen, but besides some stuttering, this one is playable. Moving on to some DS emulation, this runs really well. I tested a couple of games and they all ran great. Even with the system overclocked, it doesn't give off much heat. I do have both a DS and 3DS, so I don't use this much, but it's super cool to have. The final emulator I want to take a look at is PPSSPP. This one ran surprisingly well too. I tried both Maverick Hunter X and Portable Ops, and they both ran great. I'm gonna test some more games soon to really benchmark the performance, but so far this is really awesome. I'm not really gonna bother talking about stuff like NES, SNES, Game Boy, or GBA, since those all run with no issues of course. I'm not too interested in N64 either, but I did use the RetroArch core in the past and had mixed results. Now, to close out the video, it's time to take a look at some homebrew games. First we have Friday Night Funkin Rewritten, which is a rewrite of the original game to support previously unsupported platforms like the Switch. This is so cool to have on the Switch, the performance is great, and the controls are optimized for the Switch as well. I am just no good at this game, mainly because I haven't played it very much, but my reaction time is just not quick enough to keep up sometimes. Up next we have NZP, which I mentioned in my 3DS homebrew video, but that version of the game was very outdated, and the game of course receives updates. It has support for 60 FPS, an FOV slider, and has custom maps. And even though I have both Black Ops 2 and 3 on PC with mods, I still couldn't stop playing this one. Here's a screenshot of my last run on the game. This is probably the best way to get a traditional zombies experience on a modded Switch, and is so nice to have on the go.